Let's get started. My name is Tudor Damien. I'm IT consultant, and while my day-to-day job usually involves doing tech support consulting for companies in the US and managing large infrastructures of thousands of servers, I also handle pen testing, IT security audits every now and then, and I also have to deal with the social engineering part of the pen tests. I'd like to take some time today and take you through some of the things that you might want to look into if you're thinking you're not vulnerable to social engineering. And I'd like to start with a question, and probably a show of honesty. How many of you here have already been a target of social engineering in some way, shape, or form? All right. Quite a few honest people. The rest of you, I guess you're lying. I'm gonna show you a little bit of a video. There we go.
Security, Norman speaking. Norman, this is Mr. Eddie Vedder from accounting. I just had a power surge here at home that wiped out a file I was working on. Listen, I'm in big trouble. You know anything about computers? Gee. Right, well, my BLT drive on my computer just went AWOL, and I got this big project due tomorrow for Mr. Kawasaki, and if I don't get it in, he's gonna ask me to commit harikiri. Yeah, well, you know these Japanese management techniques. Could you, read me the number on the modem? It's a little boxy thing, Norm, with switches on it. Lets my computer talk to the one there.
212-555-4240.
So yeah, that's how they did hacking about 20 years ago or so. You probably heard of Kevin Mitnick, like a great hacker. He wasn't a great hacker. He was a great social engineer. So if you read the book he wrote, The Art of Deception, that goes a long way into describing how social engineering works and how he was able to get a lot of information by just talking to people. He didn't have to do any sort of the Hollywood hacking stuff with the access denied, access granted type of stuff. No, he only had to talk to people. Things are changing in the industry, and the reason I showed you that piece of video, that's from the movie Hackers from nearly 20 years ago, is that this is not something new. This has been going on for years, and the fact that we are not aware of it doesn't mean that it's not there and it's not happening, and it doesn't mean that it's not happening to you. And I just went on and grabbed like 2 or 3 pieces of news from the past 3 months alone. So this is recent stuff. This is not something from 20 years ago. It's still going on, and it's going on probably more than before, and we're gonna cover that in a bit. The thing is, there's so little awareness of the topic, and so little do people think that they're vulnerable to this that makes it so efficient. It's because people think I cannot be a target. I'm not that stupid. It's the guy next to me that's gonna be the target, because he's dumb as a brick, right? That's not me. So, with that being said, this is a report from the UK government, which shows that a lot of small businesses and large organizations have experienced some form of a breach in the past year. And this is stuff that they know about. Now, the really successful attacks are the ones you don't know about. And from many sources, some say 60%, some say 70, 80%. It varies. And, you know, 78.5% of statistics are invented on the spot. So I'd say that most attacks come from within the organization. It's not something from the outside. It's from within the organization. It's either somebody who's trying to do harm and works for the company, or somebody that got duped into clicking something, installing something on his computer, running some code on his computer, and giving access to someone outside. But the attack will originate from the inside. And just to go in depth on the time it takes for attacks to be discovered. Like I said, if it's a really good attack, if you're a really good hacker, you don't get caught, you don't get detected, you don't end up on the news. The guys that show up on the news, this hacker got into the NASA servers, we see that all the time over here in Romania, we're proud of that as well. Those are the stupid hackers. Those are the ones that get caught. Well, they may be the lucky ones because they usually don't get up, they usually don't end up in prison, they end up being hired by the companies that they hacked into, or other companies for that matter. But going back to this graph, you see it takes, there's no seconds or minutes on the graph. It takes from hours to days to weeks to months or even years to discover a data breach, to discover an attack. So it's not instant. You end up finding out that you've been attacked months after it's happened. And what happens in that time is really out of your control. And while attacks go, this is a fairly recent study. In the US, if you take a look over there, phishing, social engineering, it's nearly half of the companies participating in the study said that they have been targets of such attacks. So it's not something that happens randomly or to just 1% of the companies out there. If you're one of those companies, there's a next to 50% chance that you're going to be the target of a social engineering attack. So what is social engineering? Well, you have been shown earlier today the OSI model, the Open Systems Interconnection model. Everyone here familiar with that? All right. If you're not, just Google it with Bing, right? You can find a lot of info on how the OSI model works. But what's missing here, and any system out there cannot work with, is the 8th layer, the human layer. We're not in the Terminator age yet, right? Computers still need somebody to plug them in and turn them on, even if they do most of the job after that. But they're still not autonomous, so they still require human interaction. And it doesn't matter if you've got two-factor authentication and 30-character passwords and all sorts of keys and hashes and encryptions. If someone points a gun to your head and says, give me all your passwords and all your keys and all your two-factor authentication tokens, right? So that's one of the techniques in social engineering, right? So what social engineering is the science of making people do what you want. Not what they want, what you want. It's sort of like sales, right? Or marketing, trying to get people to bid to your will. And the most vulnerable component right now in the entire OSI model is people. It doesn't matter how secure the system is, if you can trick the sysadmin into giving you all the passwords, somehow. So, why are people vulnerable? And this is rather easy to explain, and most of the times hard to accept. The human brain is buggy. We've got a lot of quirks, we've got a lot of things that we think we do right, and we don't. And there were a couple of sessions yesterday and today. Benjamin yesterday talked about cognitive biases and critical thinking. We've seen some of the other stuff today. It works easily with false assumptions. Like if I say, if it rains, then the road is wet. So I'm looking at the road now. The road is wet. Therefore, it must be raining. That's false. It could have been any other reason. You could have had like the truck coming in to wash the streets, or you could have had a flood, a river just passing by, right? So there's no reason for you to infer that if the road is wet, then it's raining. And I don't know if you're familiar with the joke with the old cowboy and the lesbian, right? If not, there's this old cowboy sitting in a bar, drinking his whiskey, and out to him comes a woman, and they start talking this and that, and life and the universe and everything, and at some point she mentions that she's a lesbian, and all she does all day is think about women. And then the discussion moves on, and she leaves at some point. He gets left there with his glass of whiskey. A few minutes later, a couple walks in, goes straight to him, "Hey, are you a real cowboy?" And he says, "Well, I used to think that up to a few minutes ago, but now I think I'm a lesbian." Right? So it's the false assumptions that end up putting you in a place that you shouldn't be in. It's the logical fallacies that end up making you think in a way that doesn't get you to the right conclusion. And it's the mental shortcuts that you use every day to make your life easier, to not have to decide every second what to do, how to act in social situations. If you see a guy in a suit, well-dressed, with a server under his arm, struggling, you open up the door for him because you're a really nice guy or girl, right? You don't stop to think, hey, is that our server? Who's this guy? I've never seen him before. You just open up the door for him, right? Curiosity is also something that could be of interest. And I'll give you another example. This is from, I think, 7 or 8 years ago. A company in the US did a pen test. What they did, they were told to try and see how much data they can gather on their target company in a couple of weeks. So what they did is they set up a bunch of USB sticks with malware. They went into the company parking lot at 5 a.m. in the morning, threw those memory sticks around, and left. People came in at the office at 7, 8 a.m., got out of the car, and oh, look, a memory stick. Wow, how lucky am I? What's the first thing you do? You take it, and you go into the office, and you plug it into your computer, because you want to see what's on it, or at least you need to format it so that you can use it for your own purposes later on. Now, the moment that they plugged in those USBs, the malware ran, it got installed, it ran on the network for 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks they got access to, I think, 95% of the computers in the network without even entering the premises, because humans are curious. And there's a nice website. You're going to see the link in the slides when you get them on the website, a list of logical fallacies that are interesting to look into. Because you might not know you have them. You might not be aware about the cognitive biases that you have. Right? I mean, there's one, it's called the Google effect. And what it says is basically that people have a tendency to forget things that are easily available after a quick web search. So if you know that you can find that information easily by Googling it, you don't even bother remember it anymore. And this is a fairly recent cognitive bias. Anyone having this Google effect? There you go. So what are the types of behaviors that are usually vulnerable to social engineering attacks? First off, it's the human nature of trust. We assume everyone is friendly. We assume everyone is well-intended. And this is also the problem with all the, or nearly all the protocols out there, right? Because when they were first designed, and I'm talking about TCP/IP, I'm talking about ARP, I'm talking about DNS, when they were first designed, people thought, well, if the other computer on the network is not supposed to be talking to me, he's going to be a good guy and not talk to me, right? And I'm assuming that if I ask something, if I send a packet out and ask who is or where is that IP, I'm only going to get an answer from someone in the network that knows the answer. That's how ARP poisoning works. So even with the design of these protocols, that inherent nature of trust that humans have is there, and you tend to trust people before you end up not trusting them. So you have to be betrayed in some way, shape, or form before you say, well, he's not a trustworthy guy. But when he walks in, you almost immediately trust him. Then there's the ignorance that I mentioned earlier. You tend to ignore that social engineering is there, it exists, and that you can be a target. Then you can get to cases where a threat might motivate you into giving out information that you shouldn't. And especially when the person asking for that information is a person of authority or a person appearing to have that authority. Because if you walk in and you're nice and suited up and you just walk to the front desk and say you've got a meeting with the company CEO, and the receptionists ask for your name and you give them a false name, and they say, well, you've got no appointment. Well, if you start making a fuss and being angry, do you know who I am? I mean, are you telling me that you haven't written this down? I've been traveling for hours to get here, and I have to go to that meeting, and I mean, you know, it's these moments when that person, rather than not assume, hey, maybe he's not who he says he is, in the attempt to try and be assertive and to try and get his problem fixed, is going to also try and get him access into the building. And he's going to find a way to walk off, like, let me go to the bathroom first, or something, or I know where his office is, you don't have to lead me, I've been here before, just let me go. And you gain unrestricted access into the building because you were dressed up in a suit and got angry when they wouldn't let you in. You can try and get people on your side. You'd be amazed how many people are willing to do something if you give them something in return. There was a study in London a few years back where they stopped random people on the street and they just told them, well, I don't know you, you don't know me. Would you give out your office password for a chocolate or for a cheap pen? And a lot of people did. Now, I'm hoping most of those passwords were fake and people just wanted free chocolate. But then again, if you're thinking, well, this guy doesn't know me, I can tell him my password, I can tell him the name of my dog or my shoe size or my mother's maiden name, right? Because why would he care? Or where the city where I was born? Any of these sound familiar as security questions, right? And if your security question is, what's the name of your pet, and all you have on your Facebook page is pictures of your cat, Pat, right? Well, guess what? They might also be tempted to help you out of a sense of moral obligation. If you come in desperate, if you come in like the guy in the video, I've got this issue. I cannot log in onto my computer. I've got a deadline tomorrow and my boss is gonna kill me. Please reset my password. My username is blah, blah, blah. And you get a password reset sent to you over the phone without anything such as a callback policy. Because, okay, hello, John. Our policy is to call you back on the number that we have here. I'll call you back, John, and then we'll proceed with resetting your password. And then you call that number, and John will answer, and he's going to tell you he knows nothing about any password reset request. You're probably going to wake him up or something. So if you don't have these measures in place, you might end up giving up the wrong information to the wrong people. Now, I've got a customer in the US. He's got a saying, and I've translated this to a more civilized language, but he likes to say technology doesn't fix stupid. What this means is, yes, we've been seeing more and more things going on in the industry, and more measures put in place. Firewalls are getting better. Microsoft finally figured out how to try and secure their OS. They're still working on it, but at least it's way better than it was when Windows XP was around. And you'd take a Windows XP SP1 machine, clean install, connect it to the network, go out into the kitchen for a coffee. 20 minutes later, it was infected. That's how secure things were back then. Things have changed, so it's harder and harder to break through all the network IDS solutions and all the stuff that's being put there to try and stop attackers. So you're going to have to go to the most vulnerable component in the system, which is people, right? And you're going to have to trick them into running your code on their computer. And when you run my code on your computer, that's not your computer anymore. So this is why you can't rely on having technology secure all your data. You have to have your people aware that this is happening. Now, social engineering breaks down into a couple of ways it is done. Human-based, which is just stuff that has to do with psychology, and probably a phone, and probably some fake business cards, and some other props that you might need, but it doesn't usually involve technology, or if it does, it's only for a short while and in a very limited supply. And this usually goes against trust, fear, or that helping nature that I mentioned. And then there's computer-based social engineering with these kinds of phishing attacks and all kinds of things that are trying to make you click stuff you don't want to click on the internet. And this is why ad blockers and things that block JavaScript and all that stuff were created in the first place, to get rid of all that mess, or most of that mess. But whenever you start using computers or mobile apps, you end up as a potential target for these types of attacks. With human-based social engineering, that's easy. You can either post as a legitimate user, you can give your identity, ask for sensitive information in return, you can pose as an important user and try and get more information that way. You can say that you're one of the customers, or you're representing one of the largest customers of that company, and you can get a list of the most valuable customers off the company's website. You just have to visit that. You can act as technical support, calling one of the employees, eavesdropping, shoulder surfing, like looking over the shoulder when someone types in his or her password, dumpster diving, which is the thing in the picture, and you'd be amazed of the things that companies throw without properly destroying, shredding first. You're going to have a lot of data there. Tailgating and piggybacking. I have yet to see a company that has policies against tailgating and piggybacking. All these companies that have you scan your badge when you enter, they don't check or they don't train their employees to make sure that when they open the door, nobody else enters or exits along with them. Because you open the, and this especially in the morning, like right 9 a.m., everybody's going to work. You're not gonna scan your ID, open the door, close the door behind you, and wait for the queue that's formed outside. Whoa. And wait for the queue that's formed outside to follow through. You're gonna just open the door and 5 other people are gonna walk in with you because they're all going to work. Reverse social engineering is when, for instance, you go to a company and you say, hello, my name is Tudor Damien, I'm an IT consultant, I do tech support, here's my card, my company card, if you ever need our services, give us a call, and then you say bye and you leave, and then you attack that company and bring their servers down, and their servers are going to be down. You wait for a few days or weeks. You don't do it immediately. But then a week later, when the server's down, they're going to think, hey, last week there was this guy that knows how to fix computers. Let's call him. And you get instant access, right? So if everyone in the room, if anyone in the room wants my card, I can give it to you after the session. Computer-based social engineering, that's your basic spam, your pop-up windows, your phishing attacks, your malicious apps. That's a nice tool, a social engineering toolkit in Kali Linux. I'm sure you've seen it before. Or if you haven't, you should see it. It's cool. Fake security applications telling you that, hey, you've been infected with 17 viruses, download this app to get rid of them. And then the app says, well, I've detected all of them, but now you have to pay $50 to purchase the version of the app that's actually gonna clean your computer, and you enter your credit card information as well, and you get to pay $130 to someone in Ukraine for a product that doesn't actually get rid of the malware on your computer, because that's the malware. So these are a few of the most common social engineering attacks. You have the basic persuasion, impersonation. I've touched on a bunch of these over the session so far. Why are companies vulnerable to social engineering? First off, and this is not only what I've seen, it's a significant trend in the industry, there's insufficient training on security. People don't know that this stuff is happening. There's very easy access to information about that company that you can use to launch an attack against the company. You can come in and act as a user or a customer or contact one of the employees because you found them on LinkedIn because they're listing the company that they work with, so you have a list of all the employees. You then search them on Facebook and you find personal information, and then you can use that personal information that you've gathered to act as if you are that employee when calling the company or emailing tech support. There's several organization units that don't know what the other is doing, so you can work very well with that. There's a nearly complete lack of security policies, or even if the security policies are there, they're just paperwork that's gathering dust somewhere. It's not something that's being applied on a regular basis. Detecting such an attack is very difficult. It's not easy to figure out that you are being attacked. There's no method to ensure complete security against these types of attacks, and there's no specific software or hardware that you can plug into your brain to protect yourself from social engineering. And these are the basic phases that should go through. You do your research, you gather all the data, you select the most likely victim, which is either someone that could be frustrated and has something against the company, and you go straight to him and he's going to help you, or you go to the person that's likely to be a target of your psychological techniques that you're going to throw against them. You develop a relationship with that person and you exploit that. and the potential impact is fairly obvious. You can get into a lot of trouble if you end up giving access to your data. And I'm not just talking about data loss or, I don't know, data theft. A huge thing that I've seen happen is data changes. So the data hasn't been stolen, it hasn't been lost, you don't notice that, but somewhere in your database, a zero was added or removed, right? How does that change? What does that change? So just think about that. You can end up losing your company because of that. The common targets are people that are either not sufficiently interested in protecting the company, and they are the most likely to give out this information to you because they're not the CEO. They don't care what happens to the company, right? If you go in and you're dressed like, and you just walk around all over the office, nobody's going to even bother looking at you. But you've seen how the cleaning lady dresses, and you've seen that she goes in every Thursday, and they're not going to notice that you're going in on a Wednesday. You're cleaning, whatever, it's Wednesday. But then you have access to everything, right? You're probably going to end up dusting the servers if they're not protected, right? You can go against the users and the clients. You don't have to target the organization directly. You can go against their contractors, right? If they've got a contractor providing them data, and that contractor probably has some form of access into their systems, it's still more than you have right now. So you can start from there. You can go to the office workers, and yes, there's the high-profile targets that have the most information you need, but are harder to break. Right? The CEO will probably not give you his email password, no matter what. And this is, because I'm getting to the end of my talk here, this is one of the other things that is happening in the industry. Most of the audits and pen tests that I've had to do have been as a result of an incident. And those incidents usually come from inside threats. It's very rare that the company website was hacked and the developer used the same user and password for connecting to the database, or they use the SA user, and boom, SQL injection, and there you go. You have lateral movement, you have privilege escalation, you've got to the domain controller, and you've hacked into the entire system. Yes, that's a nice scenario, but that doesn't usually happen unless that company is doing a really poor job at writing their own applications, which never happens. The thing that happens the most often is attacks originating from within the organization. And you've got a few examples there. They're spying, and I've seen cases where people have gone to interviews and got hired, and they were essentially spies for the competition and were giving out information, sometimes for months or even years before they were discovered. Now, that makes you be a little more paranoid about your employees or your colleagues. Well, that's not my fault. You know about it now. Corporate espionage is the second level to that. There could be stuff about revenge. And when we do audits, we end up discussing like the employee exit and employee entry procedures. And it's nice to know that, yes, when an employee announces that he wants to leave, you take all the measures to ensure that his data access is revoked, and perhaps he's got his 15-day notice, so you monitor him during that time. But what you don't know is that he probably decided to leave your company 2 months ago. And in that time, he got all the data that he needed. So by the time he tells you that he wants to leave, he's already got the data that he wants. It doesn't matter that you cut off his access. And over 80% of the people leaving a company usually leave with private or confidential information, even if it's just in case. Like if you're a programmer and you've been writing code for 3 years, you're not gonna leave without your code, right? It's your code, you've written it. Even if the company now owns it, what if you have to write the same piece of code somewhere else? You've already gone through all the effort to figure out the best way to do it, so you're gonna make a copy. And the way to protect yourself against these types of attacks is, like you've heard yesterday, critical thinking, right? Before you do anything, try and slow down and think things through. Is this really happening to me? Is this something that I'm supposed to be doing? Is this an information that I'm supposed to be giving out? And you can be a really nasty person and reject any requests for help, but if they're not legitimate, if they don't make any sense other than helping people, you might want to think, what am I giving out in this process of helping that person? Because I'm a good guy, I'm sharing information, but am I giving out too much information? What can that information do to me or my company if it gets out? And there's a couple of other things. Beware of any downloads and links that take you places. And I'd like to end, there's a link up there. I don't know if you've noticed it. Did anyone bother to check it? All right. So is there, now I'm going to ask again. Is there anyone here that thinks they've been the target of a social engineering attack? So before we take questions, let's just see. I mean, we can start taking questions.
Okay, questions?
I presume that I know what's going to happen. You had the link in all of your slides, and
Okay.
with messages like let's say go there,
Yeah.
find out what's there, and I think that's your purpose, to see how many people have access
yeah.
to the link from here,
If,
and
if this is
of
gonna
course maybe
allow
a
me.
victim of the social engineering like your.
So the idea is, and the people that have visited the link would have seen a message saying, hey, this link you got from an untrusted source. Are you sure you should have visited it? And you know there's a tool to help you get rid of that stuff. But then again, here's an awesome tool that helps you do that, and there's another link. And then if they click that link, they'd get another message, whoa, you clicked another link. That's surprising. And then you get a piece of info telling you that, hey, it's probably not a good idea. This is the kind of thing that usually happens when, this is running under restricted privileges, so I cannot access anything on this computer. It's the parental measures in place. So I'm right now a kid using this laptops, and I cannot access my link. I can check it on my mobile until any other questions show up, and I can tell you how many people actually access this. So any other questions until then?
Hello. Yes, I have a question over here.
Okay.
So it was a very nice presentation. I just have a question. Can you actually give us an example, a practical example, where you have used social engineering in your work? And except this example, right? So another example, like a good example.
I'm thinking because our pen tests are covered by NDAs. So I'm not sure that I'm supposed to give up.
Try to adapt one or make us
Yeah.
actually, because I agree, all that you presented was nice, but just give us something juicy, you know?
All right, so first things, I'm on this page. 31 people hit the first link, 15 people then clicked on the second link, and 31 other hits were on the last link with the stats and everything, but then you can refresh the page and get more links that way. It's still okay, 31 people out of the room, that's still decent. I promise you, it's my word of honor, I've reset the stats before coming into the session. To answer your question, there's usually the assertiveness and the helping nature is the thing that gets me the highest rate of success. You end up being friends with someone, and there's a bunch of cognitive biases where if a person agrees with you, you tend to agree with him or her back. Yes, yes, that's true. And then again, and then when you agree once or twice, that person starts agreeing with whatever you're saying. And then you can lead the discussion. So that's one way of okay. You're asking for a specific, and I'm telling you our pen tests are under NDA.
And unfortunately, we don't have so much time.
Okay.
Okay, so I had a few weeks ago someone from our company. He impersonated a senior member and sent an email to a distribution list to give certain commands, just for the kicks, he said. Anyway, he was terminated, but that is the basic example. If you, of course, we had a problem with the email system, so he could impersonate them.
Yeah, so and that's a good example, and I have something similar to that, where I knew there was an issue with networking connection in one of the company headquarters, and they've had this issue. Their email was down, everything was down actually, and it was easy for anyone outside the company to go onto their webpage, find their support email for the help desk, for the IT staff, and send out a spoofed email with the address of the support department, asking people to, hey, we know we've had these issues. There's this tool that you'd have to install on your computer to help us debug the networking issue and help prevent it in the future. And since it came from what appeared to be the support department, it was clicked, I think, 4 times, and it was sent to around 70 people. It's enough. One click gets you in, right? And then you have your Netcat server started on your end, and boom, it opens up a link. So simple things like phishing emails for non-technical people, they work great. And that's, if you have a way of sending an email with enough information to trick the person into believing that's genuine, that will get you in. And this happened in more than one case in my experience.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. We need
I will be available for questions on the side.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.